I just audited an account in Google Ads where they literally burned thousands of dollars because they did not understand this one Google Ads metric. They were paying a premium to Google for traffic they could have gotten at a fraction of the cost. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how search impression share can save you thousands in wasted ad spend and show you exactly how much room you have to scale without the guesswork that kills most Google ad campaigns. Hey, it's Dustin from the PPC Pros. I have a quick question for you. If you're bidding $5 for clicks that you could get for $2, would you even know how to tell? I can tell you right now, most advertisers don't, and they have no idea it's happening. Today, I'm going to break down search impression share, the metric that tells you if you're overpaying for traffic and helps you reveal your current campaign's scaling potential. So let's go ahead and dive in. So first of all, what is search impression share? Search impression share is pretty simple. It's the percentage of times your ad showed compared to the amount of times it could have shown. So think of it like this. If 1,000 people search the keyword kayak tours near me, and your ad shows, let's say 700 times, that's a 70% impression share. But here's what most people miss. Those other 300 impressions, there's a good chance you could get in front of them, but that does not always mean you should, and I'm going to explain why as we go. So there's a few different metrics that Google tracks for search impression share. We'll talk about 3 of them right now. So the one we just mentioned, search impression share, is the first one. Again, it's the percentage of times your ad showed compared to how many times it could have shown. Then we've got search impression share lost to budget. This gives you an idea of how much the impression share is lost due to your limited budget. Then we also have search impression share lost to rank. This basically shows you the percentage of impression share you lost because you have either a low bid or a low quality score, or maybe a combination of both. Now, there are a few other metrics related to search impression share, like the average position on the page. We're not going to really need that for this conversation today. So let's talk about where most people are hemorrhaging cash when it comes to impression share. They see a 60% search impression share and they panic and they think, oh my God, I'm missing 40% of my customers. So what do? They jack up their bids. They go from $1.80 to maybe $3. Then maybe they go for $4, then maybe $6. But watch what happens. They had a 60% impression share at $1.80 CPC. But then, because they were concerned that they weren't at 95 or 100%, they jacked their bids up to capture more. And they succeed. But guess what? Now their CPCs are $5.35 on average instead of $1.80 for the same keywords, getting the same conversion rate. So let's look at the math for just a minute. Before, we had a $1.80 CPC. You multiply that by 100 clicks, you get $180. And let's just say they got 4 sales, 4 bookings out of that. Afterward, their average cost per click is $5.35. We get 100 clicks. Let's just say that equals $320. I'll explain why in a minute, for the same 4 bookings. Now, the reason why I said $320 and not $535, which would be $5.35 multiplied by 100 clicks, is because there's still going to be a percentage of those clicks you're going to get at the lower amount. So that's basically why that overall cost is lower. Again, I'm just estimating here just a bit, but we don't want to assume that every click costs $5.35 because that wouldn't be accurate either. But still, even if we just look at this scenario right now, they paid an extra $140 for basically maybe nothing. Well, they did get more clicks, but they still only got 4 bookings. And that's a very real scenario when you chase impression share. So here is the secret. The idea is you probably do not want to be above 85% impression share. If you're going to hit that point or above that point, you're going to start hitting the law of diminishing returns. So basically what that means is that you can get that additional 15% or so of traffic, but you are going to pay a massive premium to do it. The auction gets very competitive, very thin, prices skyrocket, and likely your ROI is going to crash. So let's flip this around for just a minute. Let's look at impression share to show you about scaling and what your growth ceiling is. So impression share also reveals how much of the market you are in front of. So check this out. Let's say you are at a 20% impression share right now with a positive ROI, and you've got basically 4x the growth potential at your current performance. So that's 20% impression share. We get up to 80. You can basically 4x where you're at right now. And most likely, again, with some caveats we'll talk about in a minute, that can hold pretty well for you, a pretty good chance of getting in front of that traffic. If you're at that 80% mark already, well, then you know that you're really at the market cap. The only way you're really going to scale this thing is if you maybe expand keywords, which is very risky. Of course, you could increase your conversion rate. You could add increase your average order value, let's say, or something like that. But you're not really going to get there by just increasing your bids. You're going to start hitting that law of diminishing returns pretty quickly. So one caveat to using it search impression share like this is if you are using broad match keywords, then it can make your search impression share look artificially low. So Google factors in all those junk impressions you probably don't want, and you might be battling with negative keywords to stay away from. So if you're using broad match, then using this strategy is not going to be very reliable unless you're getting a lot of impressions for keywords you actually want to show for. So it may not be perfect, but you have to have the majority of them be actually what you want to show ads for this to work for you. Okay, so here's the top 3 mistakes that relate to impression share that I want to make sure you avoid. Number 1 is chasing 100% impression share, or even 95% impression share, or even over 85 a lot of the time. Unless you've got a budget that you are willing to push it, you want to, grab market share, you want to be super aggressive. Listen, nobody really needs 100% in most cases. Even Coca-Cola does not buy every billboard and every TV ad. Okay, so just assuming that you need to be in front of 100 is a big issue. If you're an agency like us, then if your client comes to you and tells you they need 100%, just make sure they understand what they're signing up for, because typically when they do that, cost per acquisition goes up, ROAS could go down, profitability can go down, and they may not understand what they're doing. Okay, so just make sure they do understand there's going to be a cost to do that. Mistake number 2 is ignoring impression share by campaign type. So if you're looking at a brand campaign, you might want to aim for 90+%, maybe 90, 95. And that's, again, only if you've got active competitors bidding on your brand. And of course, if you're worried about them stealing your traffic. So if you don't have too many people bidding on your brand, you can be a little bit more lax with your impression share there. Also, for regular search terms, let's say cold traffic campaigns, however you want to look at those, you want to aim for 80 to 85%. Again, in my opinion, this is if your budget can allow for that amount. If you've got a lower budget and the market is huge, you may never get anywhere near 80 or 85%. And that could be a good thing because that tells you, once again, you've got room to scale if you're getting decent performance. Mistake number 3 is just assuming that more budget is going to equal scale. So I don't know if you've ever noticed those limited by budget warnings in Google Ads. That typically does mean that Google feels confident they can spend more and keep you at a pretty similar performance level. So let's say you're at $50 a day. They recommend $200 a day. What they're telling you, it's signaling is that, hey, with $200 a day, we think we can get you a very similar performance in this campaign. So this can be a really great thing, but assuming it will always be the case and blindly just increasing budgets like that is a mistake. So what we typically do is if the amount suggested by Google is 30% or less than the current daily budget, we'll probably just go ahead and increase it. Again, you have to have enough budget, or your client, if you're an agency, has to have enough budget for you to be able to do this, right? This is not just free money. But if we know that we're above 30%, say Google is recommending, like my example, from 50 to 200, we might go from 50 to 100 or 50 to 80 or 50 to 120. We're going to typically incrementally increase it. Again, this is assuming there's no big urgency here. Nobody's has tight schedules to try to make things happen. This is just your normal everyday situation. We don't want to overexert ourselves and find out that Google is wrong, because sometimes they are wrong and they don't actually hit that same performance, and other times they do. So we may incrementally do it. It comes down to the risk level of the client and what they're willing to do. And we always give them the option to do both and explain the potential risks. So if we do it incrementally, again, it's because there's not a huge urgency. So just write this down, guys. The main lesson here is that higher impression share does not equal higher profits. I've seen campaigns with 95% impression share lose money, and I've seen campaigns with 35 impression share print money. The difference, they understood this metric, what it means, and what it doesn't mean for their business. So let's make this practical and applicable. How do you take care of this and make sure you're not overpaying for traffic right now? Step 1 is just to log into your Google Ads account and check your impression share at the campaign level. If your brand campaigns are under 70%, you may want to increase that, again, if you've got people actively bidding on your brand and trying to steal that traffic. If your brand is a keyword, you really can't count it that way. You really have to look at that as a brand term. If you're not familiar with what a brand term is, it means your company or your client's company's brand. It'd be like Nike or Adidas or something like that. For your non-brand, if you're over 80%, you're probably overpaying. Again, the 80 to 85% right in that range is somewhere right around there is where the law of diminishing returns starts to kick in. So if you're seeing that you're over 80%, again, you may be overpaying. And also, if you've got a lot of broad match keywords or impressions that are junk, you may have an artificially low search impression share, and you may have a keyword match type issue, which needs to be addressed first. So if you're getting good performance out of your broad match keywords, then I'm not going to tell you to go and change that, but I would look at the search terms, try to get a feel for what percentage of those search terms are actually good. That could be a lot of work, I'm not going to lie. And then you can try to make some guesses as to what your really good impression share is. But if you got a bunch of junk traffic coming in, you might want to consider getting off broad match anyway if your overall account performance or campaign performance is not doing what you want with broad match. So 2, you could try to calculate your profit zone. So you've got your data, you see what's going on. You might want to look at impression share versus CPA or ROAS, whatever you're measuring, over the last, let's say, 30 days. You want to find if you've been changing things, if you've been actively pushing bids towards impression share, find out where the CPA or ROAS starts to dip below your target level, where your impression share rises. So this is something where if you haven't been doing this in a recent past, you can start an experiment to do that over a 30-day or so period. Again, depends on the budget you have left over, how is performance, what are you trying to do? But again, if you're trying to find that sweet spot, what we typically do is if we're lower on search impression share, we may push it up as high as we can reasonably go to see where our performance for our main KPI like ROAS or CPA starts to get below where we need it to go. And then we back it back down and we try to find that sweet spot. Now, this is a bit of a moving target. Things can change. New competitors come in the market. People start to spend more. Season comes in, comes out. These things might be a moving target. So you may want to revisit this from time to time. But the idea is you're going to be probably somewhere in a very similar range, except for crazy times like a Black Friday situation or maybe a high seasonal situation. Step 3, you could also look at keywords and ad groups. So you can look at this at a more granular level, like keywords or ad groups and not just campaigns. Now, if you're using manual CPC, I tend to find that keywords are where you want to focus your time and attention because that is where your bidding happens. If you're using smart bidding, the most granular you can be is at the ad group level. If your campaign level and your ad group level are very similar, like in terms of how many ad groups you have, if it's pretty decent range, you could probably just stick with campaign level, but otherwise you can make search impression share and bid adjustments at the keyword or the ad group level. That gives you a bit more control. And I tend to find there's going to be keywords and ad groups that tend to perform either better or worse than others, and some that will have higher or lower impression shares than others. This is highly dependent on how you build your accounts, but I find that to be the case for most of the time whenever we're doing audits for people. So you want to look for those that are below search impression share, limits that I've shared with good performance, and consider increasing them if you have budget. If you are above that threshold that we mentioned for diminishing returns, and you want to try to walk things down a bit, that's where you might incrementally decrease budgets. If you are getting decent performance with something that has a really high impression share, you may want to very slowly walk that down over a period of time. You don't want to just tank your good performance for the sake of saving a few bucks because that might be a bigger loss in the long run. The other thing is I would recommend doing this maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly, maybe monthly. Depends on how much you're spending and things like that. I would definitely not be looking at this daily. Number one, search impression share has a few day lag time. So you can't look at it daily anyway. You might not realize that, but you don't want to do that. I would recommend probably bi-weekly, maybe weekly. It just depends on how much you're spending, how much traffic you have coming to your account. But doing it daily, in my opinion, is overkill. So as we close out here, keep in mind, search impression share is kind of like your campaign's fuel gauge in a way. It tells you when to accelerate and when to brake. Most advertisers really only focus on the gas pedal. Sometimes they only focus on the brake pedal. They really don't always know how to toggle in between the two. And that's where they end up crashing. Now you know better, so use that to your advantage. So if you have questions about your impression share, drop them in the comments below. I read every single one and I reply to every single one. If this helped you see Google Ads a little bit differently, a little bit better hopefully, go ahead and hit subscribe because I drop game-changing tactics like this every week. And I hope to see you on the next one. Take care and God bless.